Senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I appreciate the Senator from Kansas' comments, and I'm sure he'll have to go take a call from the Vice President to discuss his remarks here on the floor. But I appreciate the way in which he talked about all that's been said here on the floor in the past between the Vice President, now President Obama, who was then a United States Senator, the leaders here in the United States Senate. We've had lots of statements here on the floor and commitments made in the past. In fact, the Majority Leader has twice committed on the Senate floor not to use the nuclear option, the last time being just a few months ago. And these were not conditional commitments. They were commitments, they weren't commitments with caveats. They were not commitments not to violate the rules of the Senate unless it became convenient for political purposes to violate the rules of the Senate. Just as recently as January 27th in 2011, the Majority Leader said, and I quote, "I agree that the proper way to change Senate rules is through the procedures established in those rules, and I will oppose any effort in this Congress or the next to change the Senate's rules other than through the regular order." Earlier this year, January 24th, 2013, a discussion between the Minority Leader, Senator McConnell, the Majority Leader, Senator Reid. Senator McConnell said, "I would confirm with the Majority Leader that the Senate would not consider other resolutions relating to any standing order or rules this Congress unless they went through the regular order process," posing a question of the Majority Leader. Majority Leader Reid, "That is correct. Any other resolutions related to Senate procedure would be subject to a regular order process, including consideration by the Rules Committee." That was January 24th, this year, 2013. Well, what's happened since that point, Madam President, that would change the way that the Majority Leader views this issue? Well, let's see. We confirmed the Secretary of Energy by a vote of 97-0. Confirmed the Secretary of Interior, vote of 87-11. Confirmed the Secretary of the Treasury, vote of 71-26. Confirmed the Secretary of State, 94-3. And I might add, in that case, just 7 days after the Senate got his nomination. Confirmed the Secretary of Commerce, 97-1. Confirmed the Secretary of Transportation, 100-0. Confirmed the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, 96-0. Confirmed the Administrator of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, 91-7. The Chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission was confirmed by voice vote. In other words, unanimously. Not to mention the fact, Madam President, that we've passed major legislation out of the Senate. We just completed a 3-week debate on a major immigration overhaul, and it passed with a bipartisan vote. We had a major debate on a farm bill, which passed with a bipartisan vote. Other legislation has moved through the United States Senate in the last few months. So it begs the question, why are we now having this discussion? The Majority Leader said back in January that he wasn't going to change the rules. And to change the rules, you have to break the rules. Let's make that very clear. It takes 67 votes to change the rules of the United States Senate. What's being talked about here is basically using a procedural device, a gimmick if you will, to be able to change the rules with 51 votes. In other words, breaking the rules to change the rules. Madam President, there is absolutely no basis, no foundation, based on the numbers and the facts I just quoted, for the majority to be making the argument that they are here today. And if you go back and look at the statements that have been made by others in the past, and I remember coming here in 2005 as a new member of the Senate from the House of Representatives, and we were at that point debating judicial nominations. The Democrats were holding up several of President Bush's judicial nominations. And there was a big debate about whether to exercise a nuclear option, in other words, to confirm some of those with 51 votes. And I remember at the time being sympathetic to that. I came from the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, we moved things in an orderly way. There was a Rules Committee. The Rules Committee decided what legislation came to the floor, what amendments were made in order, how much time was allowed for debate on each amendment. It was a very structured and orderly process. And those of us who got here to the Senate were frustrated at times with the slow pace in the Senate. And it made sense on some levels to think, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could make the Senate function more like the House? But Madam President, fortunately, cooler heads prevailed because the Senate is not designed to function like the House. It was created for very different purpose and very different design. And what we're talking about here would completely undermine that purpose and that design for this institution. And we have observed here traditions, rules in the United States Senate for decades. And what we're talking about here, if the majority has its way, is doing something that would break the rules to change the rules and forever change the United States Senate in a way that Majority Leader Senator Reid mentioned back in 2009, that doing that would ruin the country, and that the Senate would be destroyed if we went about a rules change along the lines of what's being talked about here today. And so I hope that cooler heads will prevail again. I certainly understand now, as I look back on what happened in 2005, the wisdom of those who had been here a little bit longer and understood a little bit more about the way this institution operates, the importance of having a United States Senate where you have open debate, where you have the opportunity for amendments, something that in the House oftentimes you didn't have the opportunity to do. And it's important, in my view, Madam President, that Republicans and Democrats come together here and recognize that if we go back on the traditions, the rules, the precedents here in the United States Senate, we will be forever changing not just the rules, but we will be changing the Senate. And that is certainly not what our founders had in mind, nor do I think, Madam President, that's what our colleagues on the other side have in mind. They may be well-intentioned, but what they're talking about doing is going to change forever the Senate in a way that would be very perilous to this institution, and more importantly, jeopardize the rights of the American people to have their voices heard in the United States Senate. Madam President, I yield the floor.